attend. We will hold questions until the end of all presentations. So I know everyone has a lot of questions, but we're hoping to cover many of those in the presentations. So if you have a question, write it down. At the end of the presentations, we'll go to the phone people. We'll also, anyone that's on with the chat can type their question into the chat button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll cover all of those. So first we'll cover the chat questions, then the phone questions, and then finally we'll respond to any questions that we received prior to this meeting that hadn't been addressed, time permitting. So in order to answer, or in order to finish the meeting in a timely manner, we may need to stop some of the question back and forth and or answer additional questions after the meeting that we didn't get to. I will go over as quickly as possible when we get to the question portion, the acceptable behavior and interaction guidelines at that point. But a meeting of this size, we kind of talked about already, can easily be derailed by background noise from multiple participants. And while Zoom platform that we're using here has attempted to suppress background noise, the technology just isn't there yet. So we want everyone to be able to hear what's being presented during the presentation. So we will mute all participants. Now you can unmute yourself, but if that happens and there's too much background noise being picked up, then we'll have to mute everyone again. So if you can just stay muted until the end when we get to questions, that would be greatly appreciated. The Civic Mic public engagement process aims to gather feedback from various demographics with diverse values. We would like to hear from as many participants as possible, and we will make every attempt to shield you from personal attacks or slander. So with that being said, anyone using foul language or making personal attacks will be moved to a private room by the moderator until you can regain your composure. If the unacceptable behavior continues once you're moved back out of the private room, then you will be removed from the meeting and not permitted to return. So I don't expect that that would happen with anyone in this group, but I do want you to know that we want to hear your opinion and we will not allow others to disrespect you for having a different view. With that being said, I would like to introduce Rachel Molina, the Deputy City Manager for the City of Hesperia, and she has a welcome for you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I want to thank you on behalf of the City of Hesperia for participating in this meeting tonight and sharing your time with us. I am the Deputy City Manager, and one of my responsibilities is communications and public relations, and so that is why I am involved in this project. I am a longtime Hesperia resident. I graduated from Hesperia High School, and I am very privileged to live and work in this community, and I am happy that I have the opportunity to speak with you tonight. As Danielle said, the purpose of this meeting is to share with you information about golf course operations and some of the challenges the city has, and also to answer questions you may have relating to the golf course and to the information we've shared with you over the past several weeks. We also want to hear your concerns, and again, this is the first of many conversations that we'll be having. So before I move on, I wanted to go over the timeline of the golf course ownership. The course was constructed in 1957, and it is a former PGA course. And it was purchased by the city in 2010, and the city purchased the golf course and the associated water rights. The city does not own the driving range, nor do we own the apartments next to the course, which is sometimes referred to as a hotel. And when we purchased the course, there was a series of outreach meetings done at that time in 2010 and 11. And the meetings asked residents, what do you want to see done with the course? What are what are your goals and desires for this property? We heard from our residents, some people shared that they were interested in other uses, but most people shared that they wanted the course to remain as it was. They wanted the city to not consider alternative uses. And so from those days until now, it's been operating as a golf course. And the reason that I mentioned the outreach done a decade ago is because it was a very important part of our beginning our ownership of the golf course, because the city does not have a Parks and Recreation department. The City of Hesperia has the Hesperia Recreation and Park District, which has its own elected board and its own staff and its own funding mechanisms. And so because of that, because the city is not in the parks business, it was important for us to hear from our residents and what they wanted to happen at the course. So along those lines, with respect to funding, the city operates the golf course and funds the golf course with general fund monies, the same monies that pay for police services. And so my colleague, Casey Brookshire, is on the call tonight, and he's our Director of Finance, and I would like him to share just briefly and way before we get to his slides, just kind of share with the group about the taxes that our property owners pay in Hesperia and how that compares to taxes paid to other districts. So Casey, if you wouldn't mind chiming in here.
No problem. So I'll save my introductions until it's my turn, but real quick, the City of Hesperia on the property tax in of itself, and our total budget is comprised of property tax. It only equates to 3%. Of that, when you are paying your property tax, every citizen does so. The city receives 1.6% of the property tax that you pay. So think of it this way: you pay $100, the city gets $1.60 back from your property tax. Comparing it, as Rachel was saying, to say the Park District gets 4%, so that equates to $4. The majority of the property tax that is paid, 39% goes to the county and other special districts that are not related to the City of Hesperia, and 58% goes to schools or school-related type. So again, I just wanted to point out the City of Hesperia property tax, what we pay, and I'm a citizen as well. For every $100, the city's general fund is receiving $1.60 back. Did that cover what you're looking for?
Yeah, thank you, Casey. I appreciate that. So, so that's why, again, outreach is very important, because we have limited funding and there's a lot of competing programs that vie for that funding. So with respect to this outreach, our current project timeline, we are doing a Zoom outreach meeting. The city has never done a Zoom outreach meeting, and COVID is to thank. So last fall, the City Council gave direction to staff to reach out to residents and engage them about golf course operations, the challenges with operating the golf course, and to see what the interest is of our residents in supporting a CFD to fund or partially fund golf course operations. And so, again, that direction was given to staff last fall, and so we've been working up to this meeting. We had intended to have an in-person meeting, likely at the golf course or maybe here in the Civic Complex in a community room, to invite you to join us in having this conversation. And because of the pandemic, we are starting the conversation here on Zoom. And we intend to have additional opportunities that made available to our residents, because we know not everyone is able to join us tonight, and we want to make sure that we share the same information with all of our residents, and we make ourselves available to answer questions. So residents around the course received a postcard and were invited to participate in a survey, and we thank you for doing that. We had a lot of people take the time to share their views about the golf course, and so I'm going to go through some of those responses that we received, and so everyone can have a good understanding of how their neighbors responded. So with respect to the benefits that were identified by our residents, people really valued the view and the park-like setting. They appreciated the sense of community, the quietness of the course. They appreciated that it adds value to their home and they're able to golf close to home. So some of the common interests that were expressed is that residents wanted and valued maintenance of the course, and they wanted also for dying trees to be replaced, and they wanted the city to explore opportunities to add restaurants or other uses to the facility, add amenities that are more commonly found in country clubs, and offer classes. Moving on to the next slide, some of the desired improvements that were shared was to manicure the course, to improve cart paths rather, to add amenities, to add a walking path, and remove weeds. And one of the comments about water features came up by several of our survey participants. Water features at the course are not intended to really be water features. The course has some facilities there that are intended to hold recycled water and percolates water when there's an overflow, but they are not intended to serve as a traditional water feature. Common concerns include replacing dying trees and removing overgrowth and updating the facilities. And so later in our presentation, a lot of these concerns, including repaving the parking lot, will be addressed by our golf course operator, who is going to share some of the improvements that have been made over the last several months and those that are planned in the near future. We had several people ask about the hotel, which is actually an apartment complex. Again, the city does not own that hotel, and we don't understand that it is for sale either. Now, if it were for sale, the city does not have funding to purchase the hotel, but we did receive many comments and questions about our plans or our future plans for the hotel, and so I wanted to clarify that there are none because it is privately owned. But a lot of the improvements that were requested and desired are things that are already identified and planned for the coming months, and so we were encouraged when we saw that we had the opportunity to check off some of these wish list items of our residents based on the work that our consultant and our contractor is currently doing on the course. So at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Casey Brookshire, who will speak about operations and our finances.
So let me give you a brief background of myself. I have lived in Hesperia my whole life. Went to Sultana High School. I've worked, my first professional job is here at the city. So I definitely have Hesperia ties, and I love working for the city. As far as the golf course, I have very, very fond memories of the golf course. I'm not a great golfer myself. In fact, most of the balls I hit probably end up in people's property, so let me apologize right now if anybody has property outline that area. But I have fond memories of walking the golf course with my grandfather when I was a young kid, and in fact, my wife and I got married at the golf course, so I do have ties to it, and it does mean a lot to me. However, I do have a fiduciary responsibility as a director of finance too to bring light the financial situation. So with that, before I start getting into my presentation, one thing I like to do is I'd like to let everybody know, and I'm going to steal a little bit of Sarah's presentation, just a small bit of it. What we're asking is a budget of $250,000 for the CFD. It equates approximately to $30 to $50 a month. And again, Sarah will go into the details, but I just wanted to let everybody know those are the type of numbers that are built into my financials when we get towards the end. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of an overview. First, we have the operating agreement. As Rachel said, the city bought the golf course in 2010, and immediately we entered into an operating agreement with the Hesperia Park District, a completely separate legal entity. The operating agreement spanned from May 2010 to September 2019. And during this time, the city had actual costs that it paid for the golf course. And that's what this chart here is attempting to show. So you can see the numbers. 2012-13, the city actually paid $214,000, and it goes to last fiscal year. A couple points I want to point out is you can see the water rights related cost. What that is the overproduction of water. The golf course does own its water rights. However, to water the golf course, we had to use more than what it could actually what it actually owned. So each year that cost is increasing, and you can see that box towards the end shows that our increase last year was 70,000, and you'll see later on in my presentation that it's going to actually be 100,000 this fiscal year. So real quick, that box, the reason you see 0 towards the Park District, we didn't have any well repairs. That's the middle row. And the Park District credit, that's money that we paid on behalf of the park. Park had an operating loss, is 0. What we did is there was a loss, but we reinvested it into the contract, and it's spelled out for some investments, which I will touch on, and Rick will actually show pictures later on. But one last thing before I get off of the topic of the operating agreement with the Hesperia Park District, it was mutually decided that the Park District no longer wanted to operate the golf course, and the city was ready for a new operator. But one thing I want to point at is while we had real costs for the golf course, the Park District sustained losses in addition to this. So in fiscal year 2016-17, the Park District on their financials showed a $100,000 loss. 2017-18, that loss grew to 147, and in 2018-19, that loss grew to almost 200,000, and that's in addition to what the city has been paying. So as I said, the Park District and city parted ways with the operating agreement. We did a request for bid, and Donovan Brothers was a successful bidder. So the next slide, I'm going to go into what the operating agreement has in it. And again, Rick, representative from Donovan Brothers, will go into some details what they've done. But in our agreement, we have that Donovan Brothers must maintain standards and to industry standards, and Rick can explain what that is. But the reason to do that is to increase the level of play. If we can increase the level of play, we're going to increase our revenue. Next, we have in our contract that the city will invest over $500,000 in capital improvements, and some of which, if you've been near the golf course, hopefully you can see we've improved the clubhouse, the bar has been improved, cart paths has been updated, and then we bought new course equipment to better maintain and mow the greens. We do have some improvements that are outside of our agreement, and I just want to point out, and one of them is very important to the city, and I'll explain in a few slides. First is the Reclaimed Water Project. As Rachel touched on, there is that lake But what we're working on, and we're hoping by the end of summer 2020 that we will have reclaimed water, and we can use reclaimed water to water the golf course. What this will do is free up, one, it will stabilize our costs. As you saw in the previous slide, our water costs are increasing. And two, it will free up the water rights to actually be leased from the city general fund to the Hesperia Water District, and it will create a revenue generator. So that's one project that's outside of our agreement. The second project, I'm not sure how many people are aware, but the city is looking at, or the city will be putting in box culverts on Peach Street. And what this will do, will take the flood water off of Peach and push it underneath the street. In addition to that, outside of the rainy season, this will serve as a mechanism to allow the golf carts to cross under Peach Street, and instead of how it has been forever over Peach Street. So it's going to increase the safety in the area, much to how Ashwood has their box culverts where you can cross under the street. And that project is anticipated to start late 2020 and with projected completion mid-2021 calendar year. So now I'm going to move on to some high-level golf course financial plans. Before I, as an accountant, I'm going to hit you with numbers, but I'm going to walk you through before I throw that chart on. Golf course expenditures exceed revenue. And what we're talking about here is the operating cost to the golf course, excluding the water and all that. So the cost to mow the greens, to put the flags in the pin, all the staffing at the golf course is exceeding what revenue the golfers are paying. And it has been for some time, and based on our projection with Donovan assisting, it will continue to do so. As we had already talked about, the city is not in the park business. The park district is completely separate, so I won't bore you with those figures again. Well, actually, I'm sorry, I will. Just a reminder, the property tax that we pay, 1.6% of that comes back to the city. So that $100, that for every $100, the city sees $1.60 of property tax. Next, we have permanent water rights, and this is important because what we're doing with this reclaimed water project is controlling our water costs, and it will create an opportunity to earn revenue that we can help support the golf course starting in 2021, 22, so just 2 fiscal years from now. And then the last point on this slide I want to make is the city has made investments to increase the level of play. And when I use the term level of play, it's really to increase our revenue to make the golf course as profitable as we can. So if we could go to the next slide, this is where all the numbers are. And I'll walk you through this, starting with the first box, number 1, the green shaded box. This again is think of it as all the expenses that occur on the golf course minus water. So this is all the staffing at the golf course. Again, the people mowing the lawns, the people taking the tee times. And then all the golfers paying their fees to utilize the golf course. You can see that this fiscal year, we are on track to unfortunately lose $400,000. With the level of play increasing, we see that it's going to potentially and hopefully plateau at 23, 24 at 185,000. Again, this does not include any water costs. This is just simply, think of it as the people cost. Now we go down to box number 2. It's kind of a purplish or bluish shade. And these are what the city general fund is paying. So that loss I just talked about in the 1920 column, 400,000, 397, 242 to be exact. You can see that we have to pay that out. That's coming out of our general fund. You can see we have a line item for capital improvement. So like I said, in our operating agreement with Donovan, we earmarked over 500,000 to improve the golf course and attack that deferred maintenance. This year, we are trending to spend an additional $100,000 in addition to the water rights we owe. So it looks to be that we're going to be ending our year negative $878,000 for the golf course operations. Going into next fiscal year, I'm going to just look at that line 2, the subtotal operations cost of the city. We're anticipating next year, our first year reclaimed water coming on, we're going to spend $1 million. And it's important to note, one thing I do want to point out is if you take that potable water cost of $100,000 and add it in box 3, you can see that least permanent water right of $270. That gets us to $370,000 this fiscal year. So that reclaimed water actually flattens our cost over time. So instead of $100,000 growing to $150,000 of using overproduction, we're gonna free up. We're gonna pay the reclaimed water, but we're gonna free up that revenue down below where we can actually lease this water out to the citizens, and it will, or I'm sorry, not the citizens, to the water district. And what it will do is it creates a new revenue, but it controls our cost. That's why this project is so important for us. So now I'm going to jump down to box 3, the revenue offsets. And you can see we have the leased water right revenue coming in. And in fiscal year 21-22, you can see where we had that planned budget of $250,000, and that would give us a net revenue offset in 21-22 of $520,000. At this point, the city is still putting in $263,000 for the golf course. And one thing I like to do is kind of point out what that means to the city, or what that means to the citizen. $260,000 is roughly 1 deputy plus all the gear in a vehicle that it costs the city for law enforcement. It equates to 1 deputy. Or 260,000 could be a quarter mile of road. So you can see that number that the city is still putting in, it has a real cost to the city. And the last point on this slide, I was going to point out, was before we're asking for the CFD for the consideration for alternative revenue, the city would have put in $1.8 million to bring the golf course back up. So we're increasing that revenue. And now I'm going to just go over the overview real quick. So I pointed out the city's put in $2 million before we're requesting the consideration of the CFD. We are asking a budget of $250. As I mentioned, that's roughly an impact of $30 to $50 a month. I will point out, in absent of any new funding source of the CFD, I, as the finance director, will have to make a recommendation to the city council to close the course. As I mentioned, it's not an easy recommendation. It's not something I take lightly. I have fond memories of this course. I'm tied to the course. Like I said, I was married at the golf course. But I have a fiduciary duty to the citizens to look and see how costs are for the city overall. Now, having said that, when I make the recommendation for a closure, we're not simply just saying no golf. It would be the golf course would cease to exist and revert back to potentially its desert scape. Now, that's a recommendation as a finance director. I will point out, and Rachel, you can jump in if you need to, the council ultimately will approve. It's what I'm saying is I would make a recommendation based on the dollar and cents don't add up. And with that, that concludes my presentation on the golf course financials.
Okay, we have Rick Danruther, from the regional manager from Donovan Brothers, and he will be giving a presentation on improvements at the course. Rick?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? First off, thank you for letting me come into your living rooms tonight. I've played Hesperia Country Club a long time ago. Used to manage it for the prior owner, and I'm really happy to be back. I'm very passionate about this facility, and I really want it to do very well. And it is a great golf course. I really enjoy it. And so thanks for having us involved. When we first took over, the course was, it was pretty rough. It kind of been rode hard and put away wet for a while, and it was to some point a little bit unplayable. So the first phase, what we did was to get the course mowed and taken care of so that we could keep our golfers that we had and also not lose anymore. So the first phase was the bunkering. You go to the next slide, please. And the bunkers were pretty rough. grass and weeds growing all over the place, so it made it kind of unplayable there. The roughs were very, very high. The fairways were getting a little bit rough. The greens were way too wet and spongy. The range tee box was rough, and so were the cart paths. And part of the problem was, the equipment that they had, they didn't have enough, and what they had wasn't being taken care of as well as it should be. So if you go to the next slide, we brought in some new equipment and fixed up the older equipment, so that way we could keep up with the grass and keep it mowed properly. And we still have a few more pieces to get, because you don't want to just have one piece of equipment in case this mower breaks down for 3 or 4 days. The grass isn't going to wait on us, so that's been an issue. So the golf course is looking a lot better now. We're keeping up with it. We also punched the greens for the first time just a few weeks ago. They hadn't done that in a while. So the course is looking pretty good. I was there Tuesday. The course is looking pretty good, but we have a long ways to go still. After we got the course settled down, we moved into the clubhouse. And the slide there on the left was the roof was leaking like a sieve whenever it rained. It was causing a lot of problems for the building. And fortunately, we got the roof fixed right before the storms that we got last fall. So we got that out of the way, and then we could focus on the inside. And we really went to town on the inside. We painted when you first enter, painted the hallways, the golf shop, the bar, the banquet rooms. We added some TVs if you haven't been in there for a while, and we made it a nice and cozy. The bathrooms, the outside bathrooms, we fixed those up. The inside restrooms, in particular the ladies' room, we completely renovated. It still had a lot of the 1957 decor, so to speak. So we got that, and we do get a lot of ladies that play the course, which is really neat to see. So we took good care of that. We also started decorating the course, and the theme we went with was, we're a former PGA Tour stop, and very few people can say they played a PGA Tour course. So we have pictures of our champions going down the hallway, including Arnold Palmer, Gary Player. That's kind of our theme, and it is a great golf course. We also got some good inventory in the golf shop that we're reselling, and the golf shop sales have done very, very, very well. And we also got the range set up with range balls and range mats. We're also getting the grass tee box back so we can hit off that. We expanded it, and we really think the range has picked up quite a bit. Range business has picked up quite a bit, and we think that'll really continue on now that we've taken care of it. Next slide is the irrigation. The big, I'm sorry, go back one, I'm sorry. And from day one, another big project that we've been working on is the irrigation system for the course. I mean, we have about 160 acres, and there's watering that correctly is very, very important to stay efficient. You don't want to get too dry, but you really don't want to get too wet either. And the greens were very much too wet when we first got there. And that's not good, because then it's susceptible to disease and other issues. So in some spots, we had to actually put a trench in, as you can see, to put more communication wire down. We've had to find a lot of sprinkler heads that have been buried. We've had to replace a lot. We've had to fix a lot. We've had to adjust many of them. And then also the nozzles, we had to replace several nozzles. We want to make sure on each green that the nozzles of the 5 heads that are around that are taking care of each of their sections correctly. And so that's been a big issue since day one. And right now, really our major improvement for the next few months is still the irrigation system. The front 9 is almost dialed in the way we want it, but the back 9, we still have a ways to go. And that's going to take a while. Also at the beginning, we fixed a lot of cart paths and removed some stumps and trimmed some larger trees that weren't looking too good. And the next 2-3 months, we're mainly taking care of the golf course, because we're in the middle for the golfers, because we're in the middle of our peak season here now that we finally reopened. So that's what we're doing right now. And then in the long term, especially as we get into this fall and this winter, hopefully we'll have the irrigation system down pat. We're going to get a few more pieces of equipment. We also want to continue to fix some cart paths and some more of the crossings. Every time it rains, the crossings get a lot of debris, and they get kind of blown out and it's not good. So we're going to fix those. And then also, we've got some more things to do maybe in the parking lot that we haven't had time to address at this time yet. But the results have been pretty good. The course is looking a lot better. When we've been able to open, you know, we had a lot of rain over Thanksgiving, so we lost that holiday. We also lost Christmas. And then, of course, the COVID shutdown certainly didn't help things. But when we've been open, we picked up some more rounds. We picked up some more season pass holders. The driving range is doing a lot better. The golf shop's doing a lot better. It took a little while to get the liquor license under wraps, and we only had one full month, which was February, that we had that open, and that went very well. So we've made a lot of progress, and we've seen some good activity from the golfers coming back. But we're not done yet. We still have some more things to do. So thank you.
You're muted, Danielle.
Thank you.
That last slide, those are some stumps that we've been removing, and we still have some more work to do on them.
Thank you, Rick, for that presentation. And now we will move to Sarah Maras from NBS on project funding options. Sarah?
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. This is, I think, the last presentation, so I will try to move quickly so we can get to all of your questions. The city is looking at a community facilities district as one option to fund the necessary revenue for the golf course. So for my presentation, I will talk a little bit about the legislative context and why we're here, why we're looking at a special financing district. We'll talk about special financing districts in general, a little bit of background, what the process is to form a community facilities district, and the question that everyone wants an answer to. Casey hinted at it a little earlier, but looking at those actual special tax rates based on that $250,000 budget that we're looking at. And then we will open the presentation up for questions, I believe. Next slide. In terms of legislative context, I think Casey did a good introduction to this, talking about the share of property tax that the city receives, but I just wanted to put this in a little bit of context for you. Because of Proposition 13, it is something that plays into the conversation here, as well as the Melrose Community Facilities Act of 1982. Next slide. Proposition 13 was approved by voters in 1978. It had the effect of limiting the increase of value of property taxes to 2% a year unless there was a reassessment event, such as a sale. And the ad valorem, or general property taxes, are limited to a 1% rate cap on that value. And that is encapsulated in the Constitution of California, Article 13A. So all that to say that the city really doesn't have a lot of other options in terms of raising revenue. It can't bring additional revenue into the general fund. It can't increase the amount of the general property tax or anything like that. So within that context, there were several other laws created that allow for special financing districts to be formed. The one we're talking about tonight is the Melrose Community Facilities Act of 1982. Next slide, Pablo. The Melrose Community Facilities Act of 1982 was enacted, of course, in 1982, and really as a response to Proposition 13. It calls for a reasonable special tax methodology and apportionment to property. So there is no benefit analysis. Some of you may be familiar with different types of assessment districts, say landscape maintenance districts or that sort of thing. Those are a different type of district, and those require a different type of analysis than a community facilities district does. In general, public property is exempt from paying this special tax in a community facilities district. And the Melrose Community Facilities Act is in California Government Code Section 53311 and following. Next slide. So looking more specifically at a community facilities district, I mentioned the assessment district a moment ago. That is a district that is benefit-based, and the Community Facilities District is not not benefit-based. We have to establish reasonable metrics to allocate the special tax to properties within the boundary of the district, and we have to achieve the local goals and policies established by the city. In terms of approval, there's a required registered voter vote of 2/3 of the registered voters. It is possible to do a landowner vote with a CFD, but in this case, it's not possible for us because we have more than 12 registered voters within the boundary of the district. So we are looking at you all as voters and all of the voters in the district to cast ballots related to the Community Facilities District, and it will not be formed until such a vote occurs and the vote is positive. In terms of services, a Community Facilities District can fund recreation program services, maintenance and lighting of parks, maintenance of property with a useful life of 5 years. That's just a short list to give you an example. It certainly includes the golf course and that type of facility in terms of the maintenance. Next slide. I have a chart on the screen, and I'll try to describe it just a little bit here for those of you who are on the phone. The CFD formation process is a multiple step process that starts with either the local agency initiating the CFD or a petition of registered voters or landowners. After that point, the city must adopt local goals and policies if they're not already in place. Following the adoption of the local goals and policies, a resolution of intention is considered by the City Council. The resolution of intention would approve the boundary of the CFD. It would provide the CFD name, describe the services to be funded, establish the rate and method of apportionment of special tax, and it would fix the time and place for the public hearing and describe the voting procedures. Following that action, between 30 and 60 days later, there would be a public hearing. That would be the opportunity for the public to come to the City Council meeting, or if we're still in a COVID situation, we may be all participating by phone or video or what have you, but you would be allowed to participate in that way. If there's not a majority protest at that public hearing, the council would consider the resolution of formation, and that would form the district and call for the vote of the district. So that might sound a little misleading that we're actually forming the district prior to the vote, but that is how it works. There is no authority to levy any special tax or anything until after the vote occurs. So the election would occur not less than 90 or more than 180 days after that public hearing. And again, that's a 2/3 voter approval, just like any other special tax or parcel tax or what have you. And once the election occurs, then the agency would certify the election results and adopt an ordinance, and that is what would give them the power to levy the special tax. Next slide, please. In terms of this particular CFD, we are looking at a proposed schedule where we would continue conversations with you, and that is the most important step here up front. But should we move forward with the CFD formation, and again, this is proposed, there is not a tax yet for you at this time, but this is the schedule we would be looking at. We would look at an intent meeting, so that resolution of intention being considered by council on December 1st. The public hearing on January 19th of 21. In January of 2021, following that public hearing, ballots would be mailed to voters, and the election would be held on April 20th, 2021. So this is the proposed schedule, and we will, certainly provide notices, ballots. There's lots of other communication you'll receive about this along the way. Next slide, please. And the moment you've all been waiting for, this is the slide that shows the special tax rates. So again, as Casey mentioned, we have been looking at a $250,000 annual maintenance budget, and we have allocated the special tax to properties within the CFD. That is not the entire city. It is the property immediately surrounding the golf course. And we've broken that out so that there are parcels fronting the golf course, meaning the parcel is immediately adjacent to the golf course. And then the parcels not fronting, meaning they are very close by, but not right on the golf course. So looking at single family residential, we have both a rate for the parcels that front and a rate for the parcels that don't front. Same for the apartment and the undeveloped property. And I'll read these just for the benefit of folks on the phone. The single family residential parcels that are fronting the golf course, there are 113 of those parcels or units of those parcels, and the rate is estimated at $504 per unit. For the single family residential not fronting, there are $342, and the rate, and these are annual rates, not this is not the rate per month, this is an annual rate. So again, 504 for SFR fronting, 378 for SFR not fronting. Apartment would be for fronting apartment 403 per unit. Again, annually. For the apartments not fronting, it would be $302 per unit. And then undeveloped property that fronts would pay $126 per parcel, and undeveloped property not fronting would be $101 per parcel. So again, these are annual rates for the special taxes that we are estimating at the $250,000 annual maintenance budget. I do want to mention this is a special tax that would show up on your property tax bill. So it is billed annually via the property tax bill. So not a bill you'll receive monthly in the mail or anything like that. Next slide, Pablo. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I believe we will move on from here to the questions.
Were you going to show the map, or?
I think that would be helpful. I thought I saw something in the chat of, there was a question about the map, so I thought that might be helpful for those of you that are on the computer and able to see the presentation. We do have a representation of the map. The parcels that are in the kind of pink-red color are the parcels that are fronting the course, and then the parcels in blue are not fronting. And those are the parcels within the boundary of the CFD at this time.
And this map is on the CivicMac website. You can click on any of these parcels, and you can see the APN number, the information to confirm it is your property. If they have a PIN, that means they are participating, either signed up to receive updates or have taken the survey or have contacted us in some way. Eventually here, what we're going to do is we're going to actually add the amounts that Sarah was talking about, so you can see actually for each property what the anticipated rate is.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Now we will move into questions that we've been receiving in the chat. Before we get to the chat questions and phone questions, let me just mention quickly that we would like you to only submit each question once. So once you've put it in the chat, we'll get to it. Please express your own views rather than speaking for others. Listen carefully, remain open-minded. Do not make personal attacks, and let's try and stay on track with the questions and avoid grandstanding for a topic that you'd like to talk about. So with that, we'll get started. It looks like there are a number of questions in there.
Would you like me to read them and then you can point them?
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so one of the first questions that came up is about the water features, that the golf course is designed with water features, but how does that play with the reclaimed water situation?
So the reclaimed water is to water the golf course. The plan is that the golf course uses over 400 acre-feet of water, and that reclaimed water is to simply water the golf course. It would not be added to the water feature.
Okay, another question that came up is if is there a possibility that this be a gated access type of community, and how will that interplay with this project?
I mean, I can try to answer it, and then Rachel, you can feel free to jump in. Right now, the 250,000 that we're asking is to maintain the course once the to the level of industry standards. To do something like that, would the CFD, I would imagine, would have to increase. The 250 that we're asking is just to maintain the course after the city puts its investment in and gets it up to industry standard.
Okay. What is the cost per acre foot, meaning different from the potable water to the reclaimed water? So that one, I did see that chat come through. The cost, it's not an apples to apples comparison. Right now the going rate, and I'm going to get on my calculator real quick, so bear with me. The going lease rate for potable water is approximately about $650 an acre foot to lease the water out. That gets us to 270. The reclaimed water isn't charged in that manner. It's charged based on the infrastructure costs that we have into the project itself. And that's where we determine the revenue. The one thing I will say is the leased water right, that 650 figure that I threw out there, is this year's numbers. It tends to increase 10 to 15% each year. That's why our costs were growing with potable water, whereas the reclaimed water will be, it's an infrastructure cost, it will be a set cost and with a minimal CPI increase throughout each year. So they're not apples to apples comparison there. Okay. How much has the reclaimed water project cost to date? I will have to, we're taking actually the total project cost to council. I don't have that number in front of me, so that's something I'll have to provide at a future date. Maybe a related question is, why was the reclaimed water lines run without a plan to fill the lakes immediately? This has increased costs for equipment crews to clean it out again. So I don't have the engineering on it. One thing I can say is there's the main lake, which has water in it. That's where the reclaimed water will pump into. And then the lake that everybody sees on the golf course itself is an overflow that will have, potentially could have water during the wet season. Now, the water coming into the golf course for reclaimed water is anticipated that all that water will be used. So the infrastructure going in is not necessarily being cleaned out because we plan on using all that water. Okay. If the facility is not making money, why not turn it into a park, maybe a really nice sports facility for youth sports? I'm gonna answer it from my finance perspective. The facility is not making money. To maintain a park will still have all the same costs. If it's not a golf course, it will not have any revenue, so our costs would actually increase. And then if the city's not in the golf course business, why not lease it out to a golf course management company? As I mentioned before, we did do a bid, and we were able to find an operating agreement where Donovan came in to operate it. But given the numbers, and Rick, you might be able to speak on the state of golf as it is today, golf operations are not covering the expenses.
Yes, back in the day, there were some companies that would lease a golf course and run it and, hopefully turn a profit, which, at the time would work out. But nowadays, especially the public courses, are having such a hard time that that is very rare that happens anymore. I mean, we operate many different properties, but to go all in on a leasing a golf course and take that risk is not something that I don't think any other golf company would do. We just go in, do our best, do the best job we can. Hopefully we can turn a profit to the city or the owner, whoever owns that particular golf course.
Rick, since I have you on, if the main issue is revenue, what is the management currently doing to increase revenue besides proposed physical improvements?
Well, that was the main thing, because the golfer wants to play it's a great layout. So that's number one, but it has to be in good shape, or the golfer's just going to go somewhere else. And that's what was happening. So then the very first priority we had was to put the golf course in the best shape that we could as fast as we possibly could, because the golf course was kind of leaking oil. I mean, a lot of the customers are leaving and playing the other golf courses. That's one thing that the high desert, has. It has some very good golf courses in a very small area. So the competition is pretty fierce in the high desert, and driving up and down the Cone Pass, is not the easiest thing. I mean, right now it is, but it's not. A lot of the golfers that live down here by me are not going to come up there and play. So golf is struggling, but the golf in the high desert is very competitive. And what was happening at Hesperia was because of the course conditions, a lot of people had just given up and either paying to play one of the other courses or joined at Spring Valley Lake and took their season pass there. So the good news is the course is in much better shape now. We still have some ways to go, and we're starting to get those people back. And now we want to also get back the tournament business and the outing business, which most of that had gone away also.
Okay. I think these are for you, Sarah. I'll try my best here to group them a little bit. A lot of people are asking who will vote for the CFD. Is it the whole city or just limited to this area that we're showing right now on the screen?
The vote for the CFD is limited to the registered voters that are within the boundary of the CFD. So if the boundary of the CFD remains as is, it will be only those residents and registered voters, excuse me, not residents, but registered voters who are within the boundary of the CFD. It is not the entire city that votes, given this boundary.
So if we were to pick a parcel here, any of these properties, and there were five voters that have used that address to register to vote, how many ballots would they receive?
Each voter would receive a single ballot.
Okay. And
for that measure.
The property next to it may not be used at all by anybody as a registered voter. How many ballots would they receive?
None.
Okay. So it really is tied to the registered voters, not so much the properties at all. Okay. The next question here, this may be for you, Sarah. Are there any guarantees that if a CFD was formed, the course and the facilities will be maintained to a set level? And if it falls below that level, would there be any triggers possibly to remove the CFD or adjust it somehow?
So the CFD would approve a maximum special tax rate. And within that, there may be a built-in inflator, say a CPI type increase or something like that, that is all defined in the rate and method of apportionment of the CFD that you would be voting on. Casey, maybe you can talk a little bit about whether, if somehow one of the costs of providing the maintenance were to increase unexpectedly and the revenue raised is no longer sufficient to provide a certain level of maintenance for the course, what might be the course of action that the city might take at that point?
That's a difficult question. If costs grew to such that the city could not support it, we would be in the same discussion, potentially either looking for alternative revenue or potentially closing it.
Okay. If we were a financial participant in the CFD, will there be any discount on the green fees? Not sure who that's for.
That is a question that we appreciate. We are open to considering something like that. If residents in the area are interested in supporting the CFD and golfing on the course, but what that would look like would require further conversations with the community.
Okay. Sarah, this may be for you again. So I'm going to read it verbatim here. Why isn't every property owner in Hesperia being asked to pay this tax, since it seems the majority of our group does not use any of the facilities? It seems unfair to put that cost on us.
So at this point, the boundary of the CFD has been drawn to include those parcels that are pretty directly surrounding the golf course. That certainly is something, in terms of expanding the boundary, something we can take into consideration and look at. and consider. And I think that's one of the reasons we're here with you tonight, asking for some feedback, asking for your participation in the process.
Okay. In the same line of thought, how long will this district last? What is the term?
Well, I think the city would likely say that they would like to have a funding source in perpetuity to fund the maintenance of the improvements. But that is not set at this point. And so I guess Casey and Rachel, I'll maybe push that over to you and have you discuss that a little further, but that there's nothing set in stone at this point in terms of the term of the special tax.
Well, thank you for taking that, Sarah. I would say it would go on forever for as long as it's a golf course and ensure that there's revenue for the golf course. But as you mentioned, nothing's set in stone. That's why we're here listening to the community.
Okay. Can the funds from the CFD or the Community Facilities District be used for anything other than the golf course and facilities that we're talking about here today?
No, the CFD funds can only be used specifically for the services that are indicated at the time of formation, which would be just maintenance of the golf course.
Okay. Sorry, I'm catching up here, trying to go through all
and
these.
While you catch up, Pablo, I just want to add real quickly that there are reports that are required of community facilities districts to provide accountability and transparency as far as those how those funds are used. There's reports that go to the city council on an annual basis that show the revenue and expenditures, for example, as well as reporting that is required to be provided to the state controller's office. So there is accountability built into the CFD itself and how the funds are used.
Will the special tax go up every year?
The special tax could go up every year, but it would be by a predetermined rate, whether that's a CPI inflator index rate or a flat, say 2%, 3%, or what have you. That's something that would be written into the rate and method of apportionment, and again has not yet been finalized at this point.
Okay. Rick, you want to say a little more about what the management company is doing to market the course?
Yes. First off, the golf is a word of mouth game. So getting the course in good shape was the big one, especially in a, kind of a small town type situation that it's in. The other one was we redid the website, especially talking about and promoting that the PGA Tour formal site, a former PGA Tour site, which is important, and that's our theme. So we've done that. We also are building our own database. We do have a pretty decent database of people that are following us, and we want to we want that to grow and grow as much as we can. So that's why also this summer we had some events planned that we wanted to do to get more golfers introduced to the course, especially some junior events and something like that. But everything is pretty much on a hold right now because of COVID, so that we're kind of stuck there. So basically, get the course in good shape so that the golf community is a small community itself. So they're talking about it. Hey, go back and play Hesperia. It's in good shape now, and that's been number one. The other one is the website, building our database, stay attached to and communicate with our database of people who are interested, and then we also want to start booking some more tournaments and outings. Once we can have groups back to play golf. Right now, we can't have groups at any golf course. So that's basically where we're at with trying to grow our golfers.
Okay. Sarah, if the golf course, let's say the CFD was formed, special tax in place, and after several years, the golf course ultimately closed for whatever reason, what happens to the tax, the special tax? Does it continue?
The special tax can only be levied for the services that it is authorized to fund. So should the golf course somehow be closed or be repurposed or what have you, the special tax would no longer be levied because there would be no authority to collect funds for the purpose of maintaining the golf course at that point.
Okay. I'm thinking this may be for Casey or Rachel. Will it be practical to form some sort of a foundation to raise money to support and improve the course?
It's an interesting idea. I don't know if it would be practical Well, let me rephrase that. It would not be practical to rely on a foundation to fund operations. However, if there was community interest in forming a foundation to fund special features of the course, that might be a better idea. But the funding that the city is seeking isn't a short-term shortfall in revenue. It's an absence of revenue that we're looking to cover. So we don't have a funding source for the course, and that's why if we had a CFD of 250, the city would still use monies raised through the leasing of water rights and likely commit an additional 250 towards golf course operations. And so I hope I've answered that question.
Okay.
But for an example, if a foundation wanted to raise money to, put on a special program at the course, something like that, it would be a more realistic project.
Okay, and Sarah, there's a question I think I can answer, but just to make sure, does the boundary include both sides of Hinton Street, north and south? And I will think it only looks like the north side, right? Bottom part, Hinton, is that right?
Sorry, I have other screens that are in front. Yeah, only the north side. So where that blue line is along Hinton, I guess that is the north side of Hinton, and not the south side.
And like you said, that the lines could still be worked on still. Why not go off the value of the property in determining the special tax rate?
So the Melrose Community Facilities Act is very, very broad in terms of how we can allocate the special tax. The methodology that is established just needs to be quote unquote reasonable. However, the California Constitution does limit the ability to collect tax that is based on value of property to the ad valorem or general property taxes. And so because of that, that is literally the only thing we're not allowed to use as a basis for the special tax here is the value of people's property. Okay.
This may be for Rick. Are the facilities going to be marketed as a venue for weddings or special events?
That's one of our next phases that we're kind of looking into. We did book one wedding, but it was coming up in a few weeks. So I don't know if we're going to be able to host that or not with the current COVID situation, but we would like to start, booking that banquet room for weddings and functions. So yes, that is something that we definitely we want to pursue that now that we've got the clubhouse looking better. Yes.
And Casey, if revenue was to increase from wedding or other events, that will essentially offset the costs, right? Will just basically go into the top portion that you show.
Any additional revenue would definitely offset, and that's correct. If we can increase revenue, and I will say, quick plug to Rick, it was a nice venue. That's where I had, like I said, had my wedding there.
Very good. There are a few questions there about flood insurance. Maybe Rachel, you can answer this one. Where the people in the properties in the pink, apparently, from what I'm reading, pay flood insurance premiums. Will that be offset or adjusted somehow because of the CFD?
No, it is not anticipated that the CFD will at all affect insurance rates for properties in this area.
Okay, and then some questions about the properties on the map with a PIN. What the PIN means is that they are participating in this process through a survey at civicmike.com or have called in, sent us an email, or in the Facebook group. So that's what the PIN means. Let me see if I have anything else here that I haven't covered. Well, I think I'm going to pass it on to you, Danielle, for now, and then move on to the next set of questions that you have.
Okay, so we can go ahead. It's been almost 20 minutes for the chat questions, so we can move on to phone questions. Same type of rules here to follow by. Everyone did a great job in those chat questions, and it's nice to see some people answering other questions for each other. With the phone, what we're going to do is, if you have a question, just go ahead and unmute yourself and say your last name. There may be a couple people speaking over each other, and then I'll call out the name that I hear and we'll let you ask your question.
And to unmute,
So,
they may have to hit *6 or the unmute button.
Okay, if you cannot unmute by hitting the mute button on your phone, then you'll have to hit *6. So are there any questions from the individuals who had called in on the phone?
You know, there are not that many. I could unmute them real quick here if you like. Let's see, I'm going one by one. So everybody on the there you are.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I got a question for you guys. It appears I'm on the south side of the zone for the light blue area, and we really don't play golf, and we're basically just getting by. And to add another tax when we don't play golf, and that's not even the interest of my family, is there a way you can shorten the zone and keep the light blue? Or even maybe ask them, hey, do you guys want to be a part of this, or would you like to be? Is that possible?
I mean, Casey or Sarah, would either of you like to take that one?
What I was going to say is that that's the purpose of these meetings, is to have the engagement for people to vote on. Sarah, I don't know if you have anything more to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do need to draw a reasonable boundary, and this is, you know, just sort of our starting point. And at this moment, that we looked at property that is, you know, really right there, very close to the golf course. So, you know, again, the boundary is not set in stone and could change as we move forward with this process and talk with the community.
Well, that would be nice, because I'm across the street, like I said, on the south side, and I've only had one golf ball hit in my yard at one time when I first moved up here. And, you know, like I said, if it changes, that would be nice. You know, I personally can't afford an extra tax on my little property. It would be kind of a hardship, to be honest with you. So if it's not set in stone, I guess that's a possibility.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions from the phone people?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute them again. Maybe Casey, if you can cover, some of these questions are very similar. What happens if this doesn't pass? What's going to happen with our property if there's no other source of funding or way to keep this alive?
So as I said before, I mean, I don't take this lightly, but I'm a staff person. So what I would recommend to the city council, if this doesn't pass or there's not alternative revenue to help offset, because if you recall, once we do this current fiscal year, and our fiscal year spans from July 1st to June 30th, so we're coming to the end of fiscal year 1920, and next fiscal year 2021, the city's looking to put in general fund dollars, $1.8 million. And one thing to remember is general fund, this is where we pay the majority of our funding, law enforcement, 53%. So back to my point is the city is investing $1.8 million. And if you recall, assuming that we use the revenue from the potable water, we lease that $270. And then assuming that we have this alternative revenue, CFD, of $250,000, the city will still have a cost of $263,000 that we'll have to put into the golf course. And as I pointed out, $263,000, again, trying to visualize what that means. Think of a quarter-mile road, or think of a deputy with all the gear in a vehicle. So without an alternative funding source, that amount grows it will be too much of a burden on the city's financial. And I would make a recommendation to close the course. And I don't take that lightly. Like I said, I have my ties to the course. And the recommendation that I make to close the course is just that, to close the course. There wouldn't be a recommendation to have it a park or anything else. It would to close the course and allow it to revert back to its desert scape, to ensure that we have adequate financial or finances for the rest of the city's obligations.
Danielle, you have time for one more chat one?
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, we do. Go ahead.
Okay, Rick, there's some questions about increasing the golf course fees. So can you describe where they are right now and how they compare? Meaning, what will happen if you increase it more in order to fund more of this work?
Sure, that's a good question. Whoever threw that out there is, and as we've increased the aesthetics of the course and the playability of the course, we have bumped the fees, and both the green fees, the daily fees, and also the season pass holder fees. And we will continue to do that to some extent. However, we are kind of getting close to the similar values of playing the other courses in the area. And the high desert golf courses are very inexpensive. They're very good golf courses, and they're very inexpensive. So that's kind of an issue. I mean, if we were down the hill, as they say, you know, the fees would be a lot higher. But we have bumped the green fees. We've bumped the, now that we finally got the bar open, we bumped those fees a little bit, and we bumped the season pass holder fees a little. And we would like to continue doing that as long as we can get the course worth it. It's got to be worth the dollars the person wants to pay, just like any other product. So yes, we have raised them to some extent. We are planning on raising them a little bit as the course gets better.
Now, would it be possible, Sarah, that if at some point the golf fees are high enough and is operating and making money, would there be a mechanism for the special tax to be lower for that year, or depending on the year, I assume?
Absolutely. We can write into the rate and method of apportionment a methodology by which the amount of the special tax that's levied on an annual basis takes into account other revenues that might be available. So you would still be voting on a maximum special tax because, of course, we don't know exactly what those revenues might be in the future. However, we can write in the obligation to consider those revenues as we look at the amount that's levied annually on each parcel.
Okay. Danielle?
Could I jump in real quick?
Sure.
on the finances? The one thing that was asked about Donovan Brothers to increase the revenue. We do show, and Rick worked with us, that the golf course revenues will increase. And even with the plans that Rick talked about, the operations would still run a deficit at the end of the fiscal year. I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, I'm sorry, I may have missed this, but that one of the questions I have seen here, and you may have answered it already. Did you guys address why the entire city was not included as an option to pay for to pay into the CFD?
Well, like I think Sarah and Casey both mentioned that the boundaries have not been finalized. However, as we began this project months ago, we have identified this area as the area most affected, the area that most benefits from the golf course. And so it seemed logical that the conversation started with these residents because we believe that they would be most vocal about the course and how it impacts their property and their life and their neighborhood. But again, the boundary has not been finalized.
And Danielle, I have some questions if you want me to proceed.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll do a couple more and then let's open it back up to the phone just in case they have some more questions now.
Okay. Well, they're moving so fast now. There you go. It was a good one here. There's lots of discussions about a term on the CFD. And Sarah, my understanding is that it's a ongoing district in perpetuity, right, at this point, because it's intended to continue to fund the golf course, right?
Right. I think that's the ideal, is that there would be funding available to the city to maintain the golf course in perpetuity, but the term has not been decided and is something that is set in the rate and method of apportionment of special tax. And so we're looking for input on that item here.
Why can every household just get one vote and not the way you described it?
By law, the CFD is voted on by registered voters. So unfortunately, it's state law. There's it's just the procedure we have to follow. It is a vote of registered voters who are registered to vote at addresses within the boundary of the CFD.
And can you describe quickly the rates again? I do have some questions about 30 versus 50. Kind of restate the rates that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you go back to the slides? Maybe that would be helpful for people as well. Just go back to the slide that has the rates listed.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll pull that up for you.
Here we go. Let me get there. There.
Okay, so hopefully I don't know if the person that asked that question can see all of the slides, but just to sort of read those again, the annual rate for single-family residential property fronting the golf course, that's what was shown in kind of that pink color on the map. That rate annually is $504. The rate for single-family residential not fronting the golf course, so in that blue area, was $378. For the apartment fronting the golf course, that is $403 per unit. For the apartment not fronting the golf course, that's $302 per unit. And for undeveloped property fronting the golf course, that's $126 per parcel. And for undeveloped property not fronting the golf course, it's $101 per parcel. So again, those are annual rates based on a $250,000 annual maintenance budget that Casey described.
And why are the properties fronting the golf course, both homes and apartments, have a higher rate than their counterpart not fronting?
I think we looked at that. Again, this is not a district that requires an analysis of special benefit, but there certainly was a perception and a thought that if your property is fronting the golf course, that there is more of a stake in how the golf course looks and how well it's maintained, not only for you personally, residents who might live there, but then also for just the property itself enjoys the benefit of having that landscaping and maintenance done at a high level.
And one last question before I give it to Danielle. Rachel and Casey, how are, I understand people in the city, residents of the city do pay into the recreation and park district some assessments and taxes. How does that play into this in regards to this golf course in the city?
I can take this, Rachel. The park district is a completely separate legal entity outside of the city of Hesperia. They have their own board. The city and park district are not related. So those taxes paid to the park district, those assessments paid to the park district or for the park, the city does not receive any funding whatsoever on those.
Well, and I'd like to add that in our neighboring cities, the city of Victorville and the town of Apple Valley both have park districts, and they receive property taxes to those districts that the cities use in part to operate their golf course. So it is an important distinction that the city of Hesperia does not have a parks department.
Okay, Danielle?
Yes, can we go ahead? Can you open up all the phone?
I'm doing so now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all the phone people, phone only, you're unmuted.
Hello.
Is there anyone on the phone that has a question for us?
Bill does?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's start with Bill and then we'll take the next one.
Hi, I own a house in the blue area. However, I live on the Mesa. Will I get to vote on this?
Are you registered to vote at the address in the blue area?
No.
Then you will not receive a ballot because you're not registered to vote within the boundary of the district.
So although I'll have to pay this tax, but I don't get to vote on it.
Correct.
Okay, that can be fixed. Thank you.
And unfortunately, state law allows only for registered voters within the boundary of the CFD to cast ballots.
That's okay. I can change my address.
Okay, the next question on the phone, we had another one.
Yes. Yeah, this is Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Yeah, quick question for Rachel. I just want to share something with Rachel. When they talk about water features, it's called water hazards in golf terms. The Hesperia course had a number of lakes throughout the golf course, which makes it more challenging to play. And that's one of the big drawing cards that it always had. And when the lakes went, about 75% of the golfers went because that was Hesperia Golf Course. Just some history for you. The other thing, now since we don't own the driving range, do we also, but we still own the 9-hole, that used to be a 9-hole iron range? That's on the north side?
I would have to look at the map to see. I'm not familiar with that, but we can look into it.
The reason I'm saying that is because for years, we've had that 9-hole course there, and they finally let it die 10 years ago when you guys took it over. But there was greens there and so forth, and it was just to improve your iron game. And the proposal was to put condos there. And if the city still owns it, my God, have condos on the golf course, that might solve a lot of the problems as far as the capital you need for a number of years, instead of going the Belarus way of going. The other thing, I just out of curiosity, I took and rounded the number of parcels that you put on the list there of from 698 to 700, and it figures out to be about $34, about $35 a month in round figures per month versus the 50, the 30, and so forth, or the 500, etc. So anyway, my thinking is that shouldn't we just have everybody vote on it? The entire town of Hesperia? Instead of doing a Belarus, why not just put a $1 tax per month on everybody, or $12 increase, and then everybody has benefits from it, or everybody benefits from it?
Stacey
Is
or
that
Rachel?
possible?
Again, thank you for the clarification about the water hazards. We do understand that Hesperia benefits from one of the most challenging courses in the high desert. And we can look into your question about the parcels that you identified. Back to the boundaries, though, again, this is where we're starting the conversation. The boundaries have not been finalized, and we will continue to, as we have these conversations with our residents, consider the feedback, including expanding the boundaries as we move forward. Okay.
Yeah, that would be good. If we included half of Hesperia or somebody, where you'd get this down to a reasonable thing, and just build up the golf course like it really was. It was a PGA course. And so anyway, that's my question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was great.
Any other callers with a question?
Yes, I have one.
Ellen, and
joined the meeting tonight, answered a lot of my questions, but I do have our property fronts the golf course, so I understand that our property values will be affected. But what about the other ones, the outlying ones? Will it affect their property values as well? And that would be a reason for them to want to participate in the Melrose?
The assumption is that the property values are already affected positively by being near the course, not necessarily the CFD would increase your property values.
I mean, would it decrease it by not having the course? Or it will decrease mine for sure, because I front golf course. Will it decrease other people that are, do not have that same frontal views?
I think that's a hard question to answer. I agree that those on the course, like yourself, would likely be impacted, but those further away with respect to their property values, it's hard for us to say what impact the closure of the course would have on those properties.
They really don't have a legitimate concern about having to pay for money that isn't going to affect them at all, as far as property values are concerned.
Brian Hunt has a question.
Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. I mean, I think that maybe we ought to be having some discussions with some real estate professionals to understand that, yes, a house that sells on a golf course, definitely when you go to get your house appraised, affects a house that sells 2 blocks away, 3 blocks away. So a house that's selling golf course frontage still affects the property value for a house that's not within this district, and vice versa. So somebody that's within this district goes to refinance or do something with their house, they are still affected by the property values of houses that are outside this district, and they're vice versa held down a little bit. So from that standpoint, we may want to look and talk with real estate professionals to understand the impact of this more.
It's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can address in maybe at a future meeting if we may be able to get someone to speak to that topic. So thank you for that question, Brian. Any other phone questions? Okay, so we are getting close to the end of our time here. We have a little bit more time if everyone is okay with answering a few more questions. It looks like you may have more on the chat. Pablo, is that true? Or
Yeah.
okay.
Let me see if I can. There are some questions about transferring this, in this case, back to the Park and Rec District. Maybe Rachel?
The city cannot transfer the golf course to another entity. However, the city is exploring all options for the future of the golf course.
Okay. Danielle, this will be for you. It looks like based on the pins that we're looking at on the screen, which indicate people who have so far been engaged in the process through a phone call or survey, it appears that much more outreach is required. Can you describe how we got there and so on?
Sure. So from our participation tonight, we can see that I think at one point we had 60 participants outside of the individuals who are presenting, and that's really a great turnout for our first meeting. So the people that with the pins there are individuals who have actually reached out and asked questions or taken the survey. I do understand that your community here receives a lot of postcards from maybe real estate agents and others. So the postcard about the survey may have got thrown away. So any of you that are on the call and have not signed up for email alerts through civicmic.com, CIVICMIC.com, please go there and do that. So the next time we come out to release the survey, we should have a much higher participation. But yes, we are still in the beginning of this process. When Sarah talked about her timeline, you know, we're looking towards the beginning of next year is when you will be making the final decision on whatever the city decides to implement. So we definitely hope to increase that participation. And I think maybe the map that we were showing, was that a picture from before? Because it looks like the map here has a little bit more participation showing, but
we're the same.
Oh, there, okay.
Yeah.
And you can see, I think there was one or two outside of the proposed boundaries as well.
Okay, that's all I believe I have, by the way.
Okay. We thank you all for joining us tonight, and you know, I really think it was a great turnout. Thank you for all your questions, and the city staff will take this information from tonight's meeting and use it to prepare for future discussions with the community. We will have more outreach and more meetings to discuss what will ultimately be done here. But as we mentioned, this presentation is recorded and will be saved on civicmike.com. And if you haven't signed up, go ahead and sign up so we can hopefully reach all of you in the next survey. Any other closing thoughts from you, Rachel or Casey, Rick, Sarah?
I mean, on behalf of the City of Hesperia, I again want to thank our residents for participating. We have appreciated your time, but also we appreciate the questions that you're asking, the questions about what the assessment will be for your individual properties, the questions on who votes, the questions about the boundaries. All those things are helping us to form a better understanding of how you view the golf course and how you view the funding options available to the city. I want to emphasize that this proposed vote is not going to take place until next spring, and it won't pass unless 2/3 of those voting vote in the affirmative. And so again, if it's not supported by the residents, while staff may recommend for its closure, the city council will still ultimately make that decision. And no, they don't always take staff's recommendation. And so we definitely understand that, but we have to present a clear picture of the real costs of operating this golf course and how the residents value it. So again, we really do appreciate your participation and your comments and your questions. They are very, very valuable to the process. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for allowing us to talk with you tonight. And then I do look forward to working a solution and collaborating with everybody. So thank you.
Okay.
Danielle?
Great. Thank you so much. Everyone stay safe and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.